Well, hey there, everyone, and welcome to the Know, Grow, Go podcast. I'm Matt Jordan. I'm senior pastor here at First Methodist Church Enterprise. And today, I want to share some things that I think are really important for you. One of those is going to kind of be outside of our scope of Ephesians, just to kind of tell you what the staff is doing and why this is something that's significant if you, even as the congregation, want to read along with us. And on the other side of where we're going to be, what we've been digging into in Ephesians in the beginning of chapter 3 and why that is so significant for us. The first, one of the things that we do as a staff is we routinely read a book together. And we read it, we sit down, we discuss it, we talk about it, and we go kind of chapter by chapter over the weeks in staff meeting, not just to give time to fill in that moment, but it's important to have that time to learn and to grow and to be educated together in the capacity that we're seeking the same mission. And oftentimes it's resources that some of us have never read, and oftentimes it's resources that we have put together in the capacity of our different educations and different experiences and things of that nature and of various difficulties, I guess I would say. And the reason I say that is a lot of the books that we've read over the past year have been things like Practicing the Way by John Mark Comer, a pretty simple book about really kind of practicing the presence of God, not to steal from Brother Lawrence, who wrote a book of that same title, but of a way that we can follow in the way of Jesus, as Comer puts it, in the capacity that we come to know Christ, we seek to be like Christ, and we live like Christ, right? In those different categories, if you will, of how we can learn these spiritual practices as he's our rabbi that teaches us. And so he gives a new take on discipleship, or maybe a deeper biblical take on that in comparison to the first century and how we do that. And it's very, very practical. We did this on Wednesday nights as well this past spring. One of the other things that we've read is a book called A Simple Life-Changing Prayer, about the prayer of Ignatius of Loyola, of what is called the examine prayer, of how we pray and examine our life through the day and at the end of the day, or sometimes in the morning, and seek to spend that spiritual time with the Lord. Well, the last book we read was called The Ministry in the Image of God, and it's written by a professor at Asbury named Stephen Siemens, a great work. And he takes the concept of the Trinity, which is a deep theological belief, right? We confess it on Sunday mornings in the Apostles' Creed. We confess it in how we sing the doxology. We confess it even in the way that we sing the Gloria Patri in traditional worship. And everything that we do as Christians, and especially those in church leadership, needs to be from that biblical mindset, that biblical framework. And so one of the things that Ministry of the Image of God does is it takes the Trinitarian theology and shows us the relationships that are in there, shows us how to communicate with one another, shows us how to serve in that capacity, be in community with one another. Just a really, really great work, great theological work for us. And it was a pretty deep book. Some of the staff had shared with me, Matt, this one was a challenge. There were a few of us that were just gnawing on it, right? Just love things like that. But if you don't read in that capacity regularly, some of those things can be pretty difficult. One of the things that I learned in college and in seminary, and that made seminary kind of an easy jump for me right out of college. I just continued my education in that time frame. Was I was already in the habit of reading a lot of books at one time for multiple classes, and I was in the habit of reading things that were kind of stretching me and using similar vocabulary and difficult words that I hadn't yet learned, or that don't come up in conversation, like transubstantiation and the names of God when you think about His character, right? Or His presence rather, of being omnipresent and omniscient and omnibenevolent and all of these other things that don't come up in common conversation unless you're hanging around a theology table somewhere. And I'm going to take my nerd hat off and say, it was a great read for the staff. But one of the things that we're diving into is a different book, and I read this and recommended it to a couple of other people, and I read this a few years ago. Recommended it to some folks when I came back to First Methodist in 2023. And it's a book that I just really loved, and it's called Unreasonable Hospitality, and it is a great book by Will Guardia, and it's a book that is not spiritual. It is, and I say that just as a disclaimer up front. It is not a distinctly Christian book. It is not a spiritual book. It is a leadership book, if you could put it in that category. But he had transformed a restaurant, 11 Madison, in New York, and made it one of the greatest restaurants in the world. A lot of different Michelin stars and all the accolades. But what he does is talks less about the restaurant business and talks more about hospitality and how we transform the lives of those around us through means of hospitality. There's another great work on hospitality by a lady named Rosaria Butterfield called The Gospel Comes with a House Key. And the reason I went with this one for our staff, and one that I think is a helpful read for a lot of us that are just seeking to be more hospitable or understand why that's even something of significance, is because Rosaria Butterfield takes it not just from a theological approach, but from the theological basis of why hospitality is important. Will Guardia kind of takes this from a leadership standpoint of how hospitality can be a part of your leadership. And I just want to read a little bit of this from you from Simon Sinek, who you probably know. If you've not seen his clips on TED Talks and different things, he's a great mind, has written books like Start With Why, Leaders Eat Last, a lot of other great leadership books. And he wrote the foreword about this, and just want to read a few things of what he said about it. On its surface, this is a book about a talented entrepreneur who helped transform a middling restaurant in New York City into the best restaurant in the world. However, this book is much bigger and more important than that. It is a book about how to treat people, how to listen, how to be curious, and how to learn to love the feeling of making others feel welcome. It is a book about how to make people feel like they belong. The greatest restaurants in the world became great by challenging the way we think about food, sourcing, preparation, presentation, and of course, taste. But when Will Guardia set out to make 11 Madison Park the best restaurant in the world, he had a crazy idea about how to do it. What would happen if we approached hospitality with the same passion, attention to detail, and rigor that we bring to our food? Most people think of hospitality as something they do. Will thinks about service as an act of service, about how his actions make people feel. And he recognized that if he wanted his frontline teams to obsess about how they made the customers feel, he had to obsess about how he made his employees feel. The two cannot be separated. Great service cannot exist without great leadership. In this book, Will shows the amazing impact we can have on someone's life when we give them a sense of belonging. And, as important, how inspiring it is to work together to give people that feeling. And that's an idea worth sharing, as Sinek says. And it's a great thing for us to consider the act of hospitality. And the reason is because Scripture commands us to be hospitable to one another, be hospitable to the strangers, to love our neighbor, to outdo one another in love. And a great way to do that is through hospitality. And so we're going to be going through this as a staff, and today will be kind of the first day that we do that, and we're excited for where this journey takes us, not just to learn why hospitality is important and how it can transform the lives of those around us, but when we consider and think about the depths of what it means to make someone feel like they belong, like they've been seen, like they've been listened to, like they've been loved, like they have value. That is something that is just irreplaceable of a feeling that you can leave with someone. And that's the goal that we have, right, when folks come into worship, right? We want them to of course, enjoy and to feel like they have been involved and engaged in worship and in the sermon and those things. But I tell you, one of the greatest compliments that I receive from new visitors is how welcoming our church is, and how they felt like they were valued and welcomed as soon as they came in the door. And those are things that you cannot replace. I can tell you this, and this is because I'm a theology person, and first and foremost, that is where my mind goes. Marilyn and I, when we were dating, we went to, I had stepped away from youth leadership at a church because I had one semester left and I was moving to Mobile. And I had given them a notice in the summer and said, at the end of the summer, all right, I'm stepping down, and I just really want to get things together for moving in the fall to Mobile, or moving in the spring that upcoming year. And I told him, I said, it's just going to be better that way, right? I'll get you through the summer, and you need to bring someone in. So that happened, and Marilyn and I began trying to explore churches that we could attend while we were dating. And I was serving in a small country church, and we were looking for something. And I'll just tell you this is a side note. If you don't have one of these Ember cups, all right, my friends, Hannah and Alex gave me this. Let me tell you something. This was cold when I put it in it, and it is warm now. It heats your coffee, all right? So that's free for you. That's not part of the podcast. But what I was saying is we were looking for a church that had a college group, that had some more young folks in it. You know, where we lived, there were community colleges that kind of surrounded us, but that was about it. There was no big college. And if you've ever been to a college town, you've seen that, right? Where next to the college or the university is generally a large traditional church that's been there, or a few of them, and there's always some type of contemporary church, and all of them have, generally or should have thriving college ministries. And so we were looking for something like that, where I was doing less teaching and less pouring out and being more poured into. And so we went to visit a church that was there that a lot of our friends were going to. We were in an ambassador program together. They all went there. And I knew the guy by name. He did a ministry when I was in high school and had started this church. And I thought, man, yeah, let's go check it out. Well, we get into the parking lot. Somebody meets us at the door and says, hey, let me take you up there. And I said, no, we can walk. That's fine. And they said, no, come on. We've got two other carts going around. They brought us up to the door. Somebody made our coffee for us. It was a welcoming environment experience. The whole congregation was friendly. We saw some familiar faces and from Sneed State and from folks that I knew in that community, and just felt so welcomed and loved. And the worship was powerful. And as soon as we finished worship, the sermon came about, and I told Mary Evelyn, I was like, if we make it through here without me getting up, that's going to be a blessing, but we're not coming back. But until that moment where theologically there were some things that I just could not come to terms with, we found ourselves in a position to where we just felt so welcomed, right? We felt loved coming in and didn't even know some of these people by name. And that's a feeling that's hard to walk away from. And it's a feeling that's hard to reciprocate without it being genuine. And so we always want to seek to make people feel welcomed and loved in every capacity that they come into our church. Whether they come in off the street, whether they come in from the country club, whether they come in from any capacity, we want to show no partiality to any person. We want each and every person that visits our church and that is a member of our church to feel welcomed and loved through the hospitality that we show them. And so I'm excited for this as a staff and for our staff to go through this. So if you want to read along, I encourage you to do so. It's called Unreasonable Hospitality. Again, I give you that disclaimer. It's not a Christian book. So if he uses some words here and there, shares some stories, and you're like, I don't know if this is really a Christian book. It's not. It's a leadership book. It's a practical book, but it is a really great read on hospitality and things of that nature. Now, to pick up on where we are in Ephesians, we just finished on Sunday looking through the first pericope in chapter 3 of Ephesians. And it sounds almost kind of redundant in the way that Paul communicates, as he's just spent time at the end of chapter 2 talking about this promise that the Gentiles are now within, right? That they don't have to become circumcised, that they share in this promise because of the blood of Christ, and they are being built up into this foundational home in the spiritual dwelling of which God dwells with us through his Spirit. And then in Ephesians 3, chapter 1, he continues on in that conversation by speaking about the mystery of the gospel revealed and the mystery revealed to him and to the church. And that is that the Gentiles are fellow heirs with the people of Israel, that they are included in this, and it is for the glory of God. And it has been revealed at this time to the apostles and to the church so that this can be made known to the world and that it can be made known to those around them. And that is so crucial to the mission that we have and the mission that's given to the apostles and to the disciples. When you think about Matthew 28, 16 through 20, right? What is the statement that Christ gives to them in the Great Commission? Go and make disciples of every nation, teaching them to observe all the things I've commanded you by baptizing them and teaching them, right, and discipling them. And then we look at Acts 1:8, right, which is one of our core values of intentionally living Acts 1:8 that says, right, to take this message and to go out to Judea, Samaria, Jerusalem, and all the ends of the earth in the way that we go and spread the news about Christ. And one of the ways that we can spread that is the reminder, especially in the first century, but for us in modernity, that those that are not Jewish in the consistency of the promises they've received from the Old Testament are fellow heirs in this promise. They are fellow heirs in this promise. And Paul ends his pericope here by saying that he is suffering for this reason, to make them known, to make this known to them for the glory of God and for their glory, that they share in this promise. And that as they share in this promise, they're given the power of the Holy Spirit to do so that they have boldness and they have faithfulness in the way that they serve the Lord. And when you think about boldness in how we serve the Lord, I want to share about one of our members who I've got to see this in a unique way. Maria Warren is a member of our church, and Maria, I gave her a hard time when we came back from Honduras because I said, I said, Maria, I didn't really know you that well, and I just don't know why you're not like this all the time. And she was like, "Oh, gee, thanks, Matt," and we just had a great time laughing about it, but. One of the first Love Your City events that we did, we had so much food left over, and we weren't sure what we were going to do with it. And Maria said, "Matt, let's take this out to Martin Trailer Park." I said, "Great, let's go." And so we went out there, and we were getting everything off. Me and Maria and Shane and Chancey getting everything out of the bus. And before Shannon and I could get things unloaded, Maria had already grabbed a bag, was walking up to a stranger's door and speaking in Spanish as she knocked on the door and saying, talking about how First Methodist Church loves them and we're bringing them food and, no strings attached. We just want to feed them and just give them some food and hang out with them. And so that's why I invited her to come to Honduras and not only because she's from there, but being on that mission trip with her, seeing her boldness in that capacity of sharing the gospel in that light. When we think about the boldness that we have, at times that causes us to come out of our comfort zones, right? I've seen this in a lot of our members, especially through Love Your City and through times that we've done some outreach events and things. And Fall Festival is a great opportunity for that. The way that we do our trunk or treat, being able to be bold in how we approach people, how we talk to people, but more importantly, bold in the way that we share the gospel, in the way that we speak to them specifically and intentionally about Christ. And that boldness is something that we need the Spirit within us, because I think there's a lot of fear for us in doing that. One of the things that I've learned over my years in ministry is people are timid in sharing the gospel at times. And a lot of times there's good reasons, right? The reasons that I often hear is that they don't know if someone asks a question, if they can answer it, all right? And that's a good reason. Oftentimes the reason I hear is I don't know if I can share it in a way that makes sense. I don't know if I've shared it enough to say it in a way that makes sense without messing it up. And I definitely don't want to mess up telling someone about Jesus. And that's a fair reason. Other times that I hear it is I'm afraid that of what happens when I share it. Like, of what do I do, right? How do I share it? What way do I do this? What if they're not accepting of this message? And I think that's a fairer concern in 2026. When you walk up to a stranger, and at times the first thing they do is they're going to pull up their phone and start live streaming of trying to catch this crazy person doing something weird or strange. But I think it's crucial and critical that we take those things and understand, these may be some fair reasons of what happens when someone asks me a question. What if I messed it up in presenting it? What if they're not accepting of this? And how do I do this? The Spirit gives us this boldness, not just to live faithfully, but to share this message faithfully. And the first step is just to do it, right? To just do it. That's the key phrase of Nike sports and athletic wear. And I think that it's a powerful statement, even within our faith, to just do it. Just do it. Just speak to someone, a friend, a stranger, whoever it may be, and just take that leap and just say, I believe in Jesus Christ, and He has forgiven me for so much. And I just want you to know how much I love and care for you and how much Christ loves and cares for you. And then just wait for their response. And they may say, "Thanks so much. Yeah, man, that's awesome. I'm a believer. Thanks for your boldness." Or they may say, Who are you and who are you talking about? And then you have an opportunity right there to say, "Well, I'm Matt Jordan, and I'm talking about Jesus Christ, the Son of God, who died for our sins that separate us from Him, and He loves us." And I know you may hear things about the church and what we stand against, but let me just tell you about the love of God that surpasses all things, and it gives you a chance to engage in that conversation with them, to share your own story and your own testimony in that capacity of expressing those things in faith. I think it's critical, friends, I really do, that we are bold in our faith and bold to live our faith out, which even means that around friends or around family or around coworkers, that we're not ashamed in that capacity, that we're not afraid of those ways. And I know it may be difficult in some of your line of work to be personal on that level, but think about it this way. Your faith can inform the way in which you work. As Paul tells the church in Colossae, to do everything as you do as if you're doing it for the Lord and not for man. It can inform your work ethic. Proverbs even speaks to this in Proverbs 6, that we're to go to the ant and observe its ways. And we can look in Scripture and see how our faith can inform our work ethic. Our faith can also inform our leadership by being people that are grace-driven, right? Of being able to extend grace to those who don't deserve it, don't need it. And how we look at people within the best light of trying to be charitable and hospitable to other people. Speaking of leadership books, Simon Sinek in his book, Start With Why Our Leaders Eat Last. One of them, you need to read both of them. If it's got Simon Sinek's name on it, you need to read it. It's a great work. But he speaks about a moment during the recession where a company made a change. And the change and the shift that they made was they had committed to not lay anybody off at work right before the recession. So right before this all began, they made this commitment. And instead of looking at individuals, so if they had a manager on their team who was responsible for a team of 10 people, instead of looking at those 10 people's numbers, whether they were performing or underperforming, they would go to the manager and they would say, hey, we want you to check in on this, right? And they would go and speak to him and they would hold him accountable and they would pour into that manager who then poured into his team. And they had that commitment, right? That we're not looking to fire anybody here. We're looking to pour in and to help people grow. And so they changed their mission in that capacity and held on to it through the recession and became a very successful company. The same idea is that our faith can inspire us to look at those that we are responsible for and those of whom we lead and those of whom we work for, that our faith can empower us to do so with grace, to do so with love and with kindness and with mercy, and to do so in the way that we treat people as though they belong and that we treat them in those ways that are honorable and that we look at people that they are never too far from God's grace. The other part that our faith does, even within the work-life balance, is it can give us that encouragement and instruction in how not just we treat one another, but how we make decisions with the money that we have, right? Of what do we do with this? Are we finding ways, as John Wesley said, to earn all we can, to save all we can, and to give all we can to those in need? Have we found ways in which we're being creative in the capacity of how we're using the blessings we've received from the Lord and also pouring into other people that need those blessings and need that blessing in life in whatever capacity or parachurch ministry or church ministry that looks like? And so my encouragement to you as we look in Ephesians 3 and this, as we've looked at this on Sunday, that you dig deep and realize that we are fellow heirs in this promise. What an encouragement to us that we belong to the Father, that we share in that promise together. And the Spirit gives us boldness in the way that we live out our faith as faithful people of God to honor Him, to glorify Him, to serve Him, not just in the life of the church, but also in the other hundreds of hours and days and weeks and months that we are not present with the church body, and how we serve in the law office, or as we serve on patrol, or how we serve in the classroom, how we serve in our place of business, or how we serve in retirement, and how we live faithfully in those capacities, that we can truly, as Francis of Assisi says, preach the gospel at all times, and when necessary, use words in the way that we seek to live as faithful and bold people of God. May it be so for us. Make sure that you hit the follow button. Make sure you subscribe, comment, and share this post so we can share about the church podcast and all that's going on at First Methodist Church Enterprise. Thanks for joining us on the No Grow Go podcast. I'm Matt Jordan. We'll see you later. Have a blessed week.